Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about winter skate today. How many of you have had skate? I'm glad to see all the hands up, since hopefully you all tried it this evening, right? What you were eating out there was our Provençal fish stew, which is a new product that we created last year for our Small Boats Big Taste line. And it is a tomato-based, dairy-free fish stew that is made with skate. This program provides haddock chowder and fish stew to the Greater Boston Food Bank and food pantries all across the state. Since inception, we've provided nearly 1.4 million servings, which we're super excited about. So we just wanted to point that out in case you had missed that on the table. With that, we're going to bring up Captain Scott MacAllister and crewman Sean Connors. So I know we promised you Greg Connors, but so he sent his son in his stead. Sean does crew with Greg. Why don't you guys start by telling everybody a little bit about how you got into fishing and your background?
Sure. I can start if you like. Obviously through my dad would probably be the most obvious way. I was just checking on the way over, and he's like, I think the first trip you were 7. So the first gill netting trip I was 7, had the big responsibility of just smashing crabs out of the net. Yeah, and then probably got more into it when I was around 18, honestly. Some on and off before that. Yeah, and now I do it back for the season and more to come, but did it more on an on-off basis for really the last 10 years.
I worked for Sean's dad up until... I worked for him for like 5 years, and then we bought our boat, and my brothers and a various cast of crew have worked with us over the years, so, you know. Seems like at one point or another, everyone in town's been on the boat. So.
There's a bit of that.
It's all in the family.
Yeah, you know.
All right, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's like to go skate fishing?
Day in the life fishing for skates. So in the wintertime, you chase them south of the islands. They kind of vary in depth. They'll go from like 10, 15 fathoms down to, they go all the way down to 100 fathoms. So we pretty much chase those things around, and it's either hit or miss. It seems like you get a whole bunch of them or you miss them completely. So you basically haul the net up, and you bop them real quick to settle them down, and then you throw them in the checkers.
We've got some video of that a little later.
Yeah. Yeah. It's better that they don't know what's coming.
So where do you guys fish for skates?
Mostly, I mean, it can be found all year round, but mostly east of Chatham, about what, 8 to 12 miles?
Yeah.
Depending on the season. Yeah, they're not long days. I mean, start it in the morning, 5 a.m. or so, or whatever. 8-hour days. Yeah, and then you're done by like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But yeah, mostly off the coast there.
Depending on the tide, right?
Depending on the tide, yeah. And when you can get back over the Chatham Bar, as is ever changing, as anyone who's been out there.
Do they have a stinger?
Not necessarily a stinger. They have a lot of spines, like little kind of spines that'll get you.
Tail is not.
Not necessarily. No, it's not like a stingray necessarily. Yeah, no.
Yeah, the guys
It's a good question.
They tape their hands before the day to keep this from cutting you.
Because it will get through the gloves eventually, so usually all the guys will have electrical tape all over their hands. Yeah, at certain points of high tension, and then you do the glove over that. Yeah.
That's the morning routine.
So in the summer, you're here close to Chatham. In the winter, where do you go?
South of Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. So our boat usually goes through Muskeget, and Sean's dad usually goes around Nantucket, which is probably the way we're going to have to start going, because they're building right below Muskeget, they're building that wind farm. Actually, Jared Bennett sent me a text, and he sent me an overlay of the wind farm, and he's like, "Watch out, you're in the turbines." So,
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to start going a different route to get them. But the northeast corner of the dumps, like right now, would be probably a good time to good place to catch some skates.
It's like 80, 90 miles south of Nantucket?
The dump's not even that far.
Yeah.
It's right there. You know, it's like 40 miles, maybe 35 miles.
Yeah. So those are like 30, 36-hour trips all around from dock to dock.
So you catch them in nets?
Yeah.
Here's a picture of the net. You want to explain how that works?
So obviously you have your buoy at the top. We'll start at the end. And then your buoy line goes down to the bottom. There's an anchor right there usually that holds the net in place. And then there's a float line and a sink line, and the mesh it almost just looks like a volleyball net underwater. And when the fish hit it, they get tangled up in it, and then we haul it up, untangle them, and put it back out.
And for monk and skate, you tie that down, right? Like it's not upright like a fence?
Yeah, so there's a 4-foot tie down, and then the net's actually 12 feet wide, so the tie downs actually make like a pocket that the monks will swim into and catch them.
All right. And I think you've mentioned this, but you're catching both skate and monkfish,
Yeah.
right? And for those of you that joined us earlier this year, we did talk about monkfish. That video is on our YouTube channel if you missed that presentation. We're going to let these guys narrate this video for you. They're going to explain what's going on.
This is footage from my forehead, so you get to see my view from the boat as well. A little cleanup from the set before. Basically, there'll be one guy in the back there who does what's called flaking, and he's pulling in the net and straightening it out, bit of mending, making sure it's running clean. Yeah, we're just cleaning up. Yeah, and that's the hauler there and the roller where the nets come around, and then 3 guys will stand at the table and pick the fish out. Yeah, and there's the wheelhouse there. Quick break for food. Quick powwow, yeah.
So you're dragging the net.
No, the net will stay idle, and we go and pick it up at one end, pull the fish out, and then it's all sitting in the boat. You know, the whole, say it's, 3/4 of a mile of net, and then once we're all done and it's cleaned up, then we'll just set it back. And once the anchor's back, it pulls over, and then it'll stay there for days. We'll come back and pick it up again.
Pull the fish out one at a time?
Yeah, one at a
Yep,
time.
you'll see it here. We've got some
Yeah.
video coming.
So that's the high flyer, so you can find it on the radar. It sticks out of the water.
That metal part helps ping off the radar, gives it a little surface to send it back, helps us find it again, and then we start with that. That was that long line that went up to the surface, so we'll just start hauling there.
And you didn't pull up on it, right? So
Yeah.
spin around on it.
So we're a little back on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Greg.
Yeah, that's my
That
dad
is
there.
Greg.
You make sure you don't pull the lines out of his hands. Yeah.
And everybody's got a certain spot they stand on in the boat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier, you might have seen everybody was sort of getting into position, like,
Yeah, you will stay in the same spot every time for consistency, and then you just know exactly what you have to do, which helps.
It's almost like a sports team. You know, you have
Yeah.
like your net box guy, you have your picker guy, you have the guy who coils, you know.
Yeah.
And then you have we have one guy who while we're coiling the buoy line, he goes inside and gets everybody snacks.
So that's the hammering part. Yeah.
so why do you hammer them?
I mean, hammering, from my understanding, it really is a quick death, to be honest. It finishes it off quick. Yeah, I mean, compared to when you have to do the filleting and, the filleting part of it, you'd much
So it's
rather-
merciful.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when you're keeping them, they're going to end up there, so it's a more merciful way. Yeah.
Plus, it helps make them limp. They get real stiff and they're hard to take out of the net. So if you give them a whack, they
It does make it a lot easier to take
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
You can see the
So-
the crew member in the net box back there. We've got another video a little bit later of flaking that is a better.
So that's his job, to separate it back out in what looks like kind of a twirled up mess to make it look more like a straight separated thing again.
Down again, I guess.
Yeah, and get started again.
You guys make it look easy getting those fish out of the net. It's not.
Thanks.
Weather-wise, how rough is too rough to pull nets?
It's more about too rough to go out for the boat, but the pulling of the nets part, you fall over a lot more, but otherwise it's all right.
Is there a certain size that you keep and the rest?
Yeah. There seems to be a big jump between smaller and adolescents, and then it jumps to adult. Most of, you're keeping most of the size that you're seeing there. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a set mark. It's just like.
And the mesh size too dictates how big the fish are, you know. So if this is 12-inch mesh, you're only going to catch a certain size skate.
Yeah. So that one's a barn door.
There are no size limits though, right? So unlike like a codfish where it has to be a certain size to keep it, skates don't have a size limit, right?
But if you bring in a lot of small skates to a buyer and all the wings are tiny, they'll reject your load. So it's a quality.
So it's a market thing, not a
Yeah.
regulatory thing.
So the only thing you eat are the wings?
Well, you can eat the cheeks too.
Yeah.
Just like a codfish, you can eat the cheeks.
Yeah, so we'll see some images a little bit later of them taking the wings off.
But then the racks go to lobster bait most of the time, so like nothing gets wasted, which is kind of cool.
That's a monkfish there.
Just have skates in that?
Yeah.
Just skate?
That one had monkfish as well.
Monkfish
Yeah,
as
so
well,
that one at
yeah.
the very end was a monkfish.
But you don't catch other fish in that?
Very little. There's
Yeah.
some, sure, it happens, but it's very little, which is pretty impressive that it stays pretty close. Yeah.
And part of that is because the net size is so big, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
not going
if
to
we set a
catch
smaller gauge of net, you would catch smaller fish. But what are those, Scott? 10.5 net gauge?
11s, yeah,
11.
12s.
So yeah, it's a bigger size. So if you set like an 8-inch mesh, you'd catch a lot more.
Oh, it looks like it's all tangled.
There's Nikki.
It's organized chaos.
You have to have lots of patience. Are you all good at untying knots? Is that
Yeah.
part of being good at picking a gill net?
Yeah.
How much do they weigh?
It's a great shot.
How much do
Couple
the
pounds.
skates
I
weigh?
would say
Few pounds.
like between 4 and 6 for the big ones.
So it's only a forehead camera.
This is from this is a different
This
day.
is a different day. Yeah,
That's
this is not.
this is the same boat actually, my dad's boat, but this is some different crew. This is
I think
Nikki,
that's me.
Nikki Klein, and that might be you.
Because that's Scotty McCabe in the net box.
Oh well, then that would be you. Then. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Here's the view
Scotty
from the net
cam?
box.
This is Timmy's boat, I think,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah, so this is the view from the flaker. His job is to take what looks like a tangled mess and turn it separated. And so then when you set it back, it runs clear. Yeah, so on those rougher days when you are falling over, it can get pretty frustrating.
Yeah, and if the guy in the net box is behind and the net starts piling up on the table, everybody's yelling at that guy. So,
Yeah,
you know.
it's a tough job, you know. If it's
And
running
you-
well, you get no credit. You don't
Yeah.
get attention when it's going bad.
And you get judged twice because when the net goes back out, if it goes out in a tangle, then you're in trouble too. So like the flaker is under constant heat.
Yeah.
Did one of the slides say you're running 150 nets at a time?
That is the limit between 150 and 160, depending on which area you're in. I don't know how many of your nets do you run regularly.
We run like 30 a day.
But each set will have probably 10 to 15, maybe 20.
Yeah,
But yeah.
between
Yeah,
12.
You probably turn over 30.
Between 12 and 20.
Yeah.
So you're not hauling all your gear every day.
How often do you haul a single net?
In the summertime, what do you think, every 3 days, 4 days? Depends
Yeah,
how-
it depends. You know, like sometimes in the summertime, the fishing's so, like there's so many skates in the net that you'll only get through like, you'll get your 6,000 pounds out of like 6 nets. So you only haul half a string. And then you'll leave it on the boat and you'll just, you just tie an end off to it. And then you go back the next day and you finish it off and you set the whole thing back. So you'll have like, sometimes in 2 strings, you'll have 4 days worth of fish. So you can just, yeah,
Coming back.
go back.
And that's it, yeah, sometimes in the season there's running less and you need to pull 20 nets to get the same amount of fish. And sometimes it's a lot less. But they do keep pretty well so you can go get them.
Yeah, they're hardy. They don't get rotten in the net. They pretty much stay good for a long time. They're tough fish. Skates and monks are both pretty tough.
And you got the wings right there?
Yep,
The
this
boat?
this is an image of, you want to explain what's happening here, guys?
This is the cutting process, the de-winging, if you will. Like that's basically where the racks are separated off, which are getting used for lobster bait mostly. And then the wings is the kind of the main product, the ideal one. And that's, you're separating the wings off through cutting. And that's our job. And then we send them to the fish buyers like that, and then they'll finish it off from there.
Do you usually cut cheeks too?
No, I don't.
Okay.
We used to, but
Sometimes for ourselves
I think that
sometimes.
there's like a legality issue with the cheeks because of it's like processing. It's almost like filleting. So I
Got it.
remember that being a thing, and then after that, I just didn't do it anymore. But they taste good. If you want to buy some racks, you can cut your own cheeks.
Skate cheeks are very good. Cod, if anyone remembers, cod cheeks are like a very popular food. Skate cheeks are a lot like that. They're really good. They kind of just like almost fall out of the side. You can kind of see them clearly, and it's a nice big kind of medallion.
I'm going to go on a limb and say I like skate cheeks better than cod cheeks.
Yeah, nice.
They're really
Yeah,
good.
Yeah,
So if you
I
can
like
get
them a lot
them.
too. They're good.
Yeah, so basically skates managed as like there's an overall TAC, which is a total allowable catch. So we have a summer season and a winter season, which have two different limits. You're allowed 3,000 in the summer and then 5,000 in the winter. And it's been a long time since we've hit the TAC. What happens is, like, if you hit the total allowable catch, then it drops down to 500 pounds a day for the remainder of the year. But it's been, I don't think we've hit the TAC in 5 years, so it's a good thing. Like, it's always stayed open. So everyone's allowed 3,000 pounds a day all summer. And then, you know, when September rolls around, then you're allowed your 5,000 pounds a day. And yeah, it's pretty simple. So.
What is a barn door?
Barn door. We haven't talked about barn doors yet.
Barn doors are just like, they call them barn doors because they get really big. They get like this big. And they've actually been rebuilt. So they were, I wouldn't say endangered, but they were threatened. And the stock's starting to come back, which is awesome. And they're starting to let us keep a little bit. And it's actually strange that something would get rebuilt and they've had trouble like giving it back because they just can't believe that we've actually got something back. And they're real good at taking stuff away, but they're not too keen on giving it back. So
Yeah, you guys
it's good
were-
to see some coming back.
I think it was 2003 to 2016 that you weren't allowed to land barn doors.
Yep.
And then we did a bunch of research with some of the fishing members here. We had an exempted fishing permit that allowed them to go target barn doors, not target, but catch barn doors so that we could start collecting more data on them so that would help the scientists decide if it was rebuilt or not. And also start developing a market for them again because they hadn't been in the marketplace for so long. A couple other numbers that are up here for 2023, the wing fishery that runs from North Carolina all the way up to Maine, technically, can land 30 million pounds of whole skate. So there's a lot out there that's available. In 2021, which is the most recent data we have from the state, there was a little over 6.8 million pounds of skate landed here in Massachusetts. And on Cape Cod, you'll see the value here that was worth almost $1.4 million to the state, and 1.2 of that 1.4 was caught here on Cape Cod. So this is where all the skate gets caught in Massachusetts.
When did the fishery begin?
That would probably be a Sean question because I think his dad was kind of like a pioneer in the whole thing.
Once they start showing up.
Yeah, everybody was ground fishing, and I think your dad and a couple other people started working on the skates.
Yeah, it just transitioned. I think you just wanted to focus on something else, and the money was there, and it made sense, and the fish were there. And I want to say the 90s, I'd guess. Kind of guessing, but I think it was like late 90s, early 2000s.
And I think it was unlimited too, right, back then?
Yeah,
Or
it was
10
unlimited.
10,000 pounds.
Yeah, it was a huge limit. So yeah,
Where does
and then a lot of people moved over pretty quickly to join them. and do
I don't
that.
want to get ahead of, where does most of the product go?
It goes to New Bedford, and then it gets processed. And then it goes, well, some of it goes to get frozen, and then others go, there's a fresh market in New York that doesn't get frozen. And it's people in New York, it's like a high-end thing, skate, which is ridiculous. You'll see it on a menu for like a $50 plate of skate wings, and you're like, I'm getting a nickel, or whatever.
Is it shipped to Europe? Does a lot of it go?
I think a lot of it's Asia as well, right? A lot
Yeah,
of it's
Europe,
Asian market.
Asia, you
Yeah.
know.
Asia and Europe.
Am I right in saying that the majority is shipped overseas?
I believe so. I think
Yeah.
Kate will talk a little bit more about that during her presentation, where it's going.
You ship year-round?
Yeah,
Yep.
year round. Yeah, you get the majority is caught in the summer, I'd say. That's when people focus on it. And the winter's more focusing on monkfish in the gill netting, Chatham industry at least, in these two boats that we're talking about. But yeah, most of it's in the summer, but you can catch it year round. It could be available all the time.
Yeah, I've been doing skate in the wintertime because I don't have to go as far. The monkfish are down in 100 fathoms, and the skates are like right in the shipping lane, so I just go down and get my skates and go home. It's easier.
Sounds easier. You mentioned 5 cents. Is it?
It's not
Can you
5.
talk about how the
It's
prices
actually
have
50
fluctuated?
Yeah, can't let you guys really in on the, you got to keep some secrets. No, it's 50. I think it's 50. It might be more than 50 cents right now. This year it was actually good. It was over the winter. I think it was 70 cents. And then once everybody starts going from town, and they're going every day, the price will just start to drop, you know, because there's so much influx in the market. So, but it won't drop too much. You know, 50 cents is still a pretty decent price. But we've seen all different ones. Like one year it was crazy. It was like, I think over $1, and then I've seen under 30 cents. So you gotta, you know. Yeah.
So you guys run a lot of nets. How much does it cost to put together a single net?
That's a good question, because so basically what we'll do is when the center gets worn out, we send them out to get stripped, and they cut the center part out, and then they sew a new center in, and it's right around $300, I think, to rehang a net, and then a brand new net is $600. But it might be more now because everything's starting to creep up.
A 300-foot section.
Yeah, $300 if you're keeping both the float and the sink line and just replacing what's called the webbing, like the kind of nylon part of it.
And that's all done. Did your dad use?
New Bedford?
Yeah, Hector.
Yeah.
Hector's awesome. He drives down with his whole family in his truck, and he drives to everybody's house, and he takes their stripper nets, and he goes to New Bedford, and he fixes them, and then he brings them all back.
Brings them all back. Hector. Yeah.
That's great service.
Yep.
We saw it in the video, but we didn't talk about it. There were 2 different colors of webbing. There was pink and there was green. Why? Does it matter?
Yes. One of them works better than the other, I think.
I think that's a lot of preference,
Yeah.
superstition, house. Yeah.
So from what I've heard, you can't see the color red as well underwater. So I believe.
And I've heard people like blue because it matches the water. So.
And it looks pretty. I like the pink ones.
Yeah.
I think the pink ones work the best.
I think at the end of the day, it's just variety, just trying different stuff.
One of my crew guys liked the blue. He called them Sonic Blues. He liked those. So I don't know. It's just whatever your preference is, and it helps too. Like if you get a load of nets made up in one color, and then they start getting old, you can get a different color, and then you know, like, okay, the green ones are like this generation. They're a little fresher than the pink ones or whatever. So that kind of can be helpful too. But yeah, I like the pink. I think the pink works the best.
How many boats are fishing for skate off the Cape here?
Dozen, maybe?
Yeah, probably a dozen.
There used to be a
maybe a
lot
little more than
more.
Yeah, probably around.
Yeah, a lot of some of the guys that kind of retired. There's a few young guys that have gotten into it. You know, us, Sammy, Max is doing it kind of part time.
Yeah.
So
People come in and out of it and try different things. A lot of people do multiple industries or fishing industries around here. So yeah, 12 to 20, I think, depending on the season and the time of year.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the winter fishing, I like to take January and February off now. I used to fish, and it's just too much of a hassle. So I go deer hunting for a couple months and then get back on it in like March. I start back up in March, and then I end in January and start in March.
Do any of the fleet go south
Oh, yeah.
in the winter and fish there and come back?
Well, that's where even in March, we're all fishing south of the islands.
I think it
Which
means
is
like
good
warmer,
fishing.
like south.
Like
Florida, like nice south. Not
No.
like South New England. Yeah.
I think Jan used to. I think
Yeah, Jan might have.
Jan used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty gnarly out there. You've got to time your weather windows, right? So
Yeah.
it takes 48 hours, and you got to make sure that.
And our
you're
boats are
sneaking
small.
out.
I mean, they're not like, we're in 40-foot boats. We're not in big 100-foot steel boats. So you got to you look at the weather and you're like, okay, we have, 8 hours to get there and back, and it's going to be crappy on the ride home. And it's kind of like you just deal with it. And it's always a rodeo. So I like starting a little bit later in the year and just having a few months off. But yeah.
And is it warmer offshore than it is here on Cape during the winter?
No,
Because of
it's
the Gulf
still,
Stream?
it's still cold.
It's still cold. That's not true.
It's still snowy.
Oh my God.
We're,
Do you guys focus solely on skate, or do you do other fisheries as well?
Mostly skate in the summer. I mean, I'm just kind of speaking for the Constants. It's skate in the summer and dogfish, and then monkfish and a bit of skate in the wintertime. With some little bit of other things thrown in there, but that's the focus for sure.
yeah. We do dabble in a little bit of groundfish, but it's kind of just to feel like if we have a little bit of a time slot or whatever where the skates aren't around, we can go try it in the fall. Like your dad used to do it in the fall a little bit. He'd go out and make a few trips.
Yeah. Try
But-
mackerel every once in a while, but
Mackerelin, yeah, that's a hoot.
So any other questions for Sean and Scott?
Oh, yeah.
I think we've exhausted them all. All right, thank you. All right, and we talked about the mermaid's purses, right? So these are their egg cases, and they incubate for 6 to 12 months before they hatch. And with that, I will bring up Kate Masury from Eating with the Ecosystem, and her slides will start next, but she can talk a little bit also about how nutritious they are.
Yeah, so I'll talk more about like skate as a food. I'll talk a little bit about who I am and Eating with the Ecosystem first, if that's all right. So I'm Kate Masury. I'm the director of Eating with the Ecosystem. So we're another nonprofit. We're actually based in Rhode Island, so I came from Rhode Island today. But we do work all around New England to promote what we call a place-based approach to sustaining New England's wild seafood. And so when we talk about that and we say a place-based approach, we have what we consider our 5 anchors, which are really our principles of sustainability. And when we're talking about sustainability in seafood, we're talking about our interactions as people who eat seafood, as people who harvest seafood, as those are what's sustainable or not sustainable, not necessarily those individual fish or shellfish. So the individual fish or shellfish are all sustainable in our minds and can be part of a sustainable diet. It's how we interact with those species as people that are eating them or harvesting them that is sustainable or not. So our first anchor is proximity. We want you to choose local seafood. I think we're in a room full of people who are very interested in eating local seafood, and that's why you're here. But there's a lot of benefits to eating local. Your food is traveling less far before it reaches your plate. You're supporting the community of people that actually harvested that seafood from the local waters, like the fishermen that we have here tonight. But you're also forming a connection with the place that that seafood was produced. And I think you have a greater incentive to care about that place if you're eating from it. And so that's another kind of important aspect for us, is as sustainable consumers, we should be caring about the places and taking care of those places that actually produce our seafood. And we're super lucky here in New England, on the Cape in particular, that we're really close to all these really great, productive marine ecosystems that are producing this huge diversity of local seafood for us to enjoy. The next one. So our second anchor is symmetry. So instead of just eating 1 or 2 local species, which tends to be what the majority of consumers do, we think it's really important that we diversify our diets and eat a wide variety of local seafood species, but kind of in proportion to their natural abundances. There's over 100 different species landed in New England that are edible and delicious that we could be eating. And a lot of times when you walk into your local fish market, you don't really see that huge variety available. Or if you order things on menus, a lot of times it's kind of the same things over and over again, right? And so we think as consumers, one of the roles that we can play is creating demand for some of those species that are really abundant and productive in our local ecosystems, like skate, for instance, but that aren't as frequently consumed kind of within our region. And we do a lot of work at Eating with the Ecosystem on education on the culinary side of things, and talking about the flavor profiles, the textures, how you cook those species. We'll run cooking classes, we do cooking demos, we have recipes and resources and things like that on our website to introduce people to the variety of species that we do have available in our New England waters and what they might taste like, etc., but also how to prepare them and what tools you might need to do that. Our third anchor is adaptability. So our ecosystems are constantly changing, whether it's seasonal changes. We're used to that kind of concept here in New England. We've got these cold winters and not all species are available year round. Or it could be due to longer term changes like climate change, for instance. So this is a black sea bass that's pictured here. I think this is kind of like the poster child for climate change in our region because its populations really used to be centered around like North Carolina, Virginia, and now has really shifted north, and you see a lot of them up here on the Cape or around Rhode Island and other parts of Massachusetts, etc. And so as those species move north, we can start incorporating more of those species kind of into our diets. So that's kind of an example of adapting our diets with those ecosystem changes that are taking place. And when you do that, I think sorry, I was touching the cord. When you do that, you help the ecosystems adapt, but you also help your fishing communities adapt also, because as they're allowed to catch those species, then you're helping to create a market for those products. And that's really important, because if they don't have a market to sell their seafood through, then they're not going to mostly target those species, or they're going to get really low prices for it. And so it doesn't make it very sustainable as a fishing community to harvest them. Our fourth anchor is connectivity. We think it's really important as sustainable consumers that we take care of the habitats that actually produce our seafood. And so whether you eat seafood or not, maybe you just got dragged along here tonight. And so this is something that anybody can do, whether you're vegan or vegetarian or you eat seafood every day. And it's, not using chemical fertilizers or pesticides on your lawns, using more biodegradable cleaning products in your home, maybe reducing your carbon emissions by biking to the grocery store, or voting for policies that help support healthy habitats. These are all things that, as a sustainable consumer who likes to eat local seafood, we can do to help continue to support healthy seafood production. And it can also be, participating in habitat restoration projects and things like that. And then our fifth anchor is our community anchor. So you guys are doing a great job with this one, I think, tonight by coming to events like this and meeting your local fishermen and connecting with them. I think that's a really important part, is that when you're eating local seafood, you're supporting your local fishing community. But we also see local seafood as something that we can come together around as a community and really celebrate. There's a lot of cultural significance to it. There's a lot of cultural heritage to it, whether you grew up on the Cape or from somewhere halfway across the world. We all have our traditions or family connections tied to the seafood industry, or memories and history. And I think that's something that we should be celebrating and kind of sharing together as well. And so our community anchor kind of encompasses all of that also. So that's kind of like a little bit about what we do as an organization. So it's a lot of education and outreach with consumers. And then we also do research a lot of times on the marketplace side of things. So we'll talk with seafood businesses and understand kind of where the seafood is going within the marketplace. We've run citizen science projects where we've had people like you come and help us collect data on the availability of New England seafood in markets, or test out items on restaurant menus and stuff. So those are some of the kind of examples of ways that we do things. But I got invited here tonight to talk about skate and the kind of the culinary properties of it. And you guys have already seen a bunch of pictures of skate on the boat. But in case you hadn't, I wanted to show what they looked like alive/whole. And you can kind of see their face. So they're actually underneath. And we had on the last slide kind of what they eat. They eat a lot of like invertebrates and shellfish. And I think that what fish eat is really important to understand, because it helps describe the flavors of it. And so I think that shellfish-rich diet of the skate gives it a really sweet, kind of briny flavor that is, I would say, comparable to a scallop, more so than like a finfish. It's got this sweet, just very sweet flavor, and then a very unique texture. So on a cod, or a haddock, right? The flakes are kind of vertical on the muscle tissue. On a skate, it's more, horizontal, almost like kind of the striations, like going like a finger in your hand. So like those skate wings. We'll go to another photo, I guess. All right, yeah. So here's a skate wing. So the striations are coming kind of like this. And so that's the way that it flakes. So it's definitely different texturally. There's nothing really to compare skate to in texture, but flavor-wise, I would say definitely most similar to a scallop. And this is, the boys talked about, you wing the skate on the boat. So when it comes into the seafood dealer or business, a lot of times this is what it looks like. And we've got a skate wing here. It's got that rough skin on it that does have spines, and that is kind of tough to remove. I think that's the hardest part of dealing with skate from a processor's point of view, is removing the skin on it. So some places, like in New Bedford, there's places that have skate skinning machines that literally, that's what they do, is they skin the skate so that you don't have to do it by hand. We work with a bunch of different chefs, and we normally go to Johnson & Wales every year also. And so this is some pictures actually from some Johnson & Wales students learning to deal with skate. But this is a student that's using their thumbs kind of to get under and remove the skate skin. And that's definitely the most challenging part. The students doing it with a knife. But you can either peel it off kind of, or you can cut it off. And then once you've removed the skin on your skate, then you want to basically fillet it. And in the middle is this cartilage. So skate are cartilaginous fish. So like a shark, they're related to stingrays. They don't have that same barb. I think someone asked about that earlier, that's actually going to physically sting you or stab you. They have those little spines that kind of make it uncomfortable for another animal to eat it. But other than getting spiked, you're not going to get poisoned or anything. Basically, there's cartilage that kind of goes through the middle, and so there's a fillet on top and a fillet on bottom. And so once you've removed that skin, you can either enjoy that skate wing actually with cartilage in. So some chefs will actually cook it bone in, as they call it, and that adds a lot of moisture to your dish. A lot of times if you're baking it or roasting it in like sauces and stuff like that, they'll leave the bone in, and it adds some different flavor and moisture, and kind of is really good that way. But you can also just fillet it. And so a lot of times if you're buying it at a fish market, you'll just see the fillet of the skate, which is kind of what's happening over here. And I have more pictures on the next slide. But you'll just get the fillet. There's no bones. If you're someone who doesn't like to get pin bones in your fish, skate's a great option because there's no pin bones. And so this is kind of what the fillet would look like that if you bought it at a fish market. It should be a nice kind of clean fillet like that. This is an example of bone-in skate. So there's a fillet up top, fillet down bottom. There's a cartilage right here in the middle. And this one's just been chopped up into chunks. And then in terms of cooking, skate's one of my favorites to cook at home, actually. It's really versatile and really simple. Again, once you buy it from the fish market, there's not a ton of cleaning up you have to do. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of gray membrane still left on it. That's like where it was attached to the cartilage. You can leave that on it, or you can cut it off to just make it look more pretty. But one of my favorite ways is just pan searing it really simply. So this is a picture of a skate pan searing actually in my home. But olive oil, salt and pepper, or you could a higher heat oil if you don't want to smoke out your house. It's pretty much all you need. You can also, I'll go to the next slide, I guess. You can do a lot with it. This is one of a recipe from our cookbook. It's a brown butter with lemon and capers and parsley, so like a piccata kind of. So that I feel like is a sauce that goes well on basically any fish or chicken or anything. It's delicious. And so honestly, add butter to anything, it's delicious. But skate, I think it works really well on. And so in this case, all we did was dust that skate fillet in a little flour, season it with some salt and pepper, and then saute it in a pan. And then you just took the skate out, put it to the side, added the butter to your pan, and added those capers and lemon juice, and then dusted it with parsley. And it was pretty quick and simple. And we do have that recipe and others kind of on our website also. But skate's super simple that way. It cooks up pretty quickly. I think one thing that's really nice about it is that it doesn't dry out super easily. It kind of holds its moisture well. And so it's kind of hard to mess up, honestly. And there's fish that we like here in New England that you maybe want like more medium rare, or a scallop you don't mind if the middle's kind of raw still, right? On a skate, I do like to cook it all the way through and really have it kind of like flake apart and be opaque. So basically, as soon as it turns pure white, you're good. And that's it's pretty thin fillets, and so it cooks up pretty quickly. You can also cook it just like without flouring it at all. So if you're like gluten-free or anything like that. I mean, you could use a different type of flour, like a rice flour or something, or you could just do no flour whatsoever. So this is a picture of a miso glazed skate. I marinated this one in some miso paste. I think there's mostly just miso paste and a little oil actually in that dish. And then I just pan seared that one also, but I've also done that grilled and you get a nice char on it, which is really good. So especially in the summer, I feel like that's a great way to go is grilling it. You just want to make sure you oil the grates on your grill so that it doesn't stick too much. Or if you have a grill pan, you can do that also. But it's great in kind of like I think, in terms of adding Asian flavor profiles or kind of more classic French techniques. And we were talking about markets for skate earlier, about like where it might go. And a lot of it does get shipped over to Europe. It's a really high-end dish in France, or like on high-end restaurant menus in other countries. It's very popular. And same thing in Asia. They use it all the time. It's really popular in Korea and Japan and all these different countries. It's just not quite so popular here. It hasn't caught on yet. But it should. It's really tasty. So this is a skate dish that was prepared by a chef actually on Long Island, but it's a green coconut curry that's with it. So you can, again, really switch up the flavor profiles, but in almost all these dishes, this is one with like a almond and lemon and butter kind of sauce on it. And then this is just a fried skate wing. So if you like fish and chips, skate's a great option for that as well. It deep fries really well. And so in almost all these cases, we just really pan-seared the skate and just cooked it really quickly or fried it in that case or whatever. But the cooking of the skate part is actually really simple. It's whatever sauce you want to add or flavor profiles you want to add to it. And another nice thing about skate is I think it freezes really well. So one thing being like a shark, in the shark kind of family, being a cartilaginous fish, I feel like sometimes the shelf life of those animals is not as good. Like once it's kind of filleted and in your fridge or at the fish market, it can go bad a little bit more quickly. And so buying frozen skate is one really good option, and it's easy to get kind of. You can just keep it in your freezer, thaw it when you need it, and then use it right away. Or if you say you buy a lot, you only see it at the fish market every once in a while, and so you take advantage of when it's there. Buy it, vacuum seal it, throw it in your freezer, and it freezes really well and thaws really well. So some good options for just keeping it.
All right, thank you, Kate. Do we have questions for Kate?
Yeah.
Where would we be able to buy skate around here?
So you should be able to go into any fish market on the island, and actually here's a list of some of the ones that actually carry it. But if those are kind of not an option for you, or maybe there's, I mean, these are Chatham, so it should be pretty close. But you can. There's a lot of online places that will ship it to you also, and as I said, it freezes really well, so getting shipped frozen skate is great. Or go into your fish market, and whether it's skate or you want to try monkfish or you want to try dogfish or whatever else that you're kind of interested in trying, ask for it. Ask your market to see if they'll special order it for you, because if these are not maybe one of the markets that you normally shop at and you want to go to your favorite fish market that you go to all the time, see if they'll order it for you, because a lot of times skate's caught locally, as you know, and so they have access to it. They just don't carry it a lot of times because they don't think people actually want to buy it. And so if you as consumers help create demand for that product, you'll start to see more fish markets actually carrying that product. And so, yeah, I would say ask for it at whatever fish market you like to shop at, but here's some great examples of places that have it in stock most of the time. I believe skate's protein content, we had the slide up earlier that had the exact protein content. It's pretty high. It's a nice, dense, kind of meaty fish. So protein content, I think, is pretty high in comparison to I mean, most fish is a really good lean protein source regardless or whatever, but I think, skate's definitely up there in terms of being a great source of protein. There you go.
90 calories, 1 gram of fat, 20 grams of protein.
For 3.5 ounces, so that's like pretty. I mean, that's a small-ish fillet. So if you were wanted a bigger meal, you could do like a bigger portion or whatever and get more protein.
Yep. Other questions for Kate on how to prepare skate?
Yeah. Do you ever bake it? What was it? Bake it? Yeah, you can totally bake it. So I've worked with some chefs and they've done either baked or roasted skate kind of. And so basically depending on, I guess, how many pieces you're doing and if you're doing it bone in or how thick your fillet is, you might want to vary the time a little bit or whatever. But a lot of times just 350, like a kind of standard oven temperature. And then again, you're just looking for it to be white kind of all the way through if you're baking it. So it's nice to kind of just check it with a fork and make sure it's not kind of still pink or kind of clearish in the middle. But I would say maybe about 15, 20 minutes kind of at around 350. And again, it depends on if you're putting it into cold liquid or something like that for if you're more poaching it or something like that, or if you're just baking it on a sheet pan. But that's a great option. And then, yeah, I've seen chefs do a kind of a more roasted version with the bone in and with other vegetables and stuff, and that's been really good. And then you guys had it in seafood stew actually tonight, so it works really well actually in a chowder or stew also. It kind of breaks apart almost like a crab meat texture.
Pulled pork.
Or a pulled pork kind of texture. And so it's very versatile. You don't necessarily have to just pan-sear it or whatever. All
right, with that, I'll hold you for just one more minute. Tonight's seafood sample has been prepared by Chef Tyler Hadfield. He is the chef at the Barley Neck, which you might know of as the Barley Neck Inn. It has been rebranded to the Barley Neck in Orleans here. So his sample tonight is a curried skate wing with sticky coconut rice and a tomato masala chutney. And with that, thank you.